When Bob Lazar finally got the job at Los Alamos, he was told that he had been assigned to work at a facility south of Groom Lake. He then describes how he actually got to the facility. He boards a Janet flight at McCarran Airport, which is an aircraft specifically used to carry workers to and from Las Vegas in Area 51. He claimed that it took around 25 minutes to get to Groom Lake, and upon landing, most passengers just went straight to the main base. Lazar, however, was pulled away and directed into a bus with blacked out windows. And after a short drive, the bus arrives at the base of Papoose Mountain, near Papoose Lake, about 15 miles south of Groom Lake. And here he identifies the facility as S4, literally meaning Site 4. Now, Lazar's description of S4 includes a few things. A series of hangar doors built into the side of the mountain. Doors painted like camouflage to match the rock. Interior consisting of narrow corridors and small rooms, armed guards always escorting you everywhere, and instructions to look straight ahead at all times. When entering the facility, Lazar claimed that he was escorted inside and placed into this small room before being given briefing documents and left alone to read them. Now, in those briefings, according to Lazar, he reads things that just blow his mind. Craft that didn't originate from any known human program. At least one craft at the facility was allegedly recovered during an archaeological dig. So meaning this is hundreds, if not thousands of years old. Again, this is what he's reading. References to biological entities associated with the vehicles, and an explicit mention of the Zeta Reticuli star system as the supposed origin of at least one of the craft. So imagine this. This guy's a scientist. He's a smart dude, maybe a little tizzed out, sits down in a room and is reading the most insane briefing you could ever imagine. He also notes a list of project code names. So Project Sidekick, Looking Glass, and Project Galileo. Now, in order, these are basically what they are. Sidekick seems to be related to weapons or defense applications. Looking Glass is related to space-time and gravity manipulation, and then Galileo is focused on gravity-based propulsion. Now, this is what Lazar is assigned. Now, on one of his early visits to S4, Lazar is basically escorted down a hallway past several open hangar bays, and he reported seeing a disc-shaped craft that's approximately 52 feet in diameter, 16 feet tall. It had a smooth metallic surface, no rivets or bolts or anything like that, and it had a small American flag decal stuck to the outside of the craft. Now, over time, he claims to have seen 9 different craft in total, with different shapes and configurations, and his conclusion was simple. They likely didn't all originate from the same place. Lazar says that his work at S4 was pretty straightforward. His supervisor, this guy Dennis, possibly the same person earlier, possibly Rick Doty, no one knows. His partner on the project was a technician named Barry, who had been on the project before Lazar was even hired, and his assignment was to work exclusively on the Sport Model's propulsion system. Now, I'll explain what that is in a second. And he was also restricted from interacting with other teams at all, even if he saw them just hanging out in the hangars. Now, his partner Barry claimed a previous scientist assigned to the same sport model craft was killed while he was attempting to cut into the power source or the reactor. Now, he also claims that a group of Russian scientists had previously been allowed to work at or near S4, but they were later kicked out after an unspecified breakthrough or a serious incident, and it was never really clarified what that was. And of course, we don't really have evidence for this apart from Bob's own words. Now we get into one of the most crucial parts of this entire story. So, Bob Lazar, he starts describing the heart of the propulsion system as a reactor that they had removed from the craft to study. Now, he describes it as such. Basically a smooth half dome mounted on this flat square base. There's no wires or switches or controls or literally anything. And it's activated by placing the dome into a specific position on the base. And when it was activated, it created a field that would physically prevent his hand from touching it, literally like a sci-fi force field. Now, Lazar claimed that this reactor ran on an exotic element with the atomic number 115, which he calls element 115. He even explains how this process works, saying that element 115 is bombarded with protons, briefly turning it into element 116, which then releases a strong gravitational A wave used for propulsion. Now, the wildest thing about this entire claim is that element 115 has not been synthesized on Earth yet. Well, that was until 2003 when scientists at a nuclear institute in Russia synthesized element 115, which is now called moscovium, and it was done inside a lab in Moscow. However, it is extremely unstable and decayed within milliseconds, but Lazar claims that the material they had at S4 was a stable isotope, one that is not naturally occurring on Earth. Now, it just makes you wonder about that Russian team that Lazar was talking about that had this breakthrough, and then all of a sudden, 15 years later, you have the Russians developing this unstable element 115. Interesting, to say the least. Now, another little fun fact, an atomic number is just the number of protons that's in an atom. So the existence of element 115 was always inevitable, right? It was always clear that that does exist, or it's out there, but it was just simply the next empty slot on the periodic table. So that means Lazar identifying 115 isn't a prediction or like a secret knowledge. It's just basic chemistry that this thing is inevitably out there. They just haven't really synthesized it on Earth. Now, another claim of Lazar's is that there are two types of gravity. Gravity B is the gravity we're all used to, governs the planet and the sun, stars, and all that stuff. Now, gravity A is smaller and more controllable, and the entire field is associated at the subatomic level. And the key components of the sport model craft basically subsist on this gravity A. Now, this is where we meet this thing known as omicron mode. This is a specific setting in the sport model UFO that allows the craft to tilt so that its underside faces the target direction. And in this mode, the reactor emits gravity A waves, which can be amplified and directed by 3 gravity amplifiers inside the craft. Now, these amplifiers can be aimed to create a literal warp in space-time. The craft doesn't simply fly in the traditional sense, it falls into a hole where the gravity is warping around it and propelling it forward. Yeah, I know, this sounds crazy, but this is what Bob Lazar said, and this is how he explained these craft, to work, basically. So now we have an idea of who Bob is and how the craft works from the outside based off of his explanation, and how he even got involved in this super specific sport model craft inside the super specific program, inside the super specific facility. But what does it look like on the inside? Well, Bob Lazar's description is pretty boring, to be honest with you. Like, it's basically just says it's like one single color throughout the entire ship. It's like a dark gray thing. There's no angles really. Like, it's all just like smooth curves, and there's no visible switches or displays, and there's no wiring or compartments like a glove box or anything at all. But what it did have was 3 small seats arranged around this central column that was obviously too small for humans. And he also described 3 different levels. So there was an upper level that was not accessed by him, but it had dark panels and they would open up, revealing the sky, suggesting maybe like a navigation area or like an observation thing. Again, he didn't know because he didn't access it. Then there's the middle level, which is where the 3 chairs are and the reactor were actually placed. And then there's the lower level. And now this is where the 3 gravity amplifiers are connected to mechanical arms. He also notes another team was working inside the craft at one point, focusing on a transparent panel that was embedded in the archway. But he was, again, not allowed to have any direct contact or communication with this team. Now, Lazar claims that at least once he was escorted outside S4 to watch a controlled test flight of this sport model aircraft. And he says that the craft just lifted silently off the ground. It hovered side to side in the smooth, stable way that didn't look like a jet or a helicopter or anything like that. And it stayed in what he says was this kind of like low performance mode. No crazy like right angle turns or instant, gravitational accelerations, nothing like that. But according to him, he was told that the more aggressive maneuvers were done at night when the chance of satellite surveillance was far lower. But one detail really bothered him. He says that radio communication was being used to talk to whoever or whatever was in the craft during the test. Now, to him, this didn't make any sense at all, especially with what he understood about the alleged space-time distortion gravity machine that was caused by this reactor, which he thought would completely interfere with any type of normal radio transmission. So this posed an issue for him that he still hasn't fully reconciled on a personal level. But in a certain capacity, these discrepancies or these things that don't really add up almost give his story more credibility. Because why would he lie about something that doesn't make sense?